My first book, XLZABK001, is the red book. My second book that comes out on February 11th, XLZABK002, is the blue book. So in this video, I'm going to talk about the significance that those two colors have for me and why I chose to make one book the red book and why the second book is the blue book. So the first thing, just to get it out of the way, is that this red and blue stuff has nothing to do with politics. So I wrote the red one when there was a Democrat in office. That's Democrats are the blue guys, right? And I wrote the blue one when there was a Republican in the office. The Republicans are the red guys, right? I don't participate in any of that. I don't vote. I'm generally anti-government in almost every way possible. So this whole political thing is just a hindrance to me, and it kind of bothers me that we're so polarized that simple colors now have political weight behind them. I guess they kind of have for a long time, but it's just, it's just amped up so much now that somebody might assume that this is the blue book because he's a liberal guy and he used to be a Republican. I don't know. If you were thinking anything like that, you're wrong. It's got nothing to do with that. It's purely coincidental. Oh, also, it's got nothing to do with the Matrix movies either. I saw the first Matrix movie in the theater and I couldn't stand it. I wanted to walk out of that thing. I never saw any of the sequels. I don't know what any of those movies are about. I know there's a red pill and a blue pill and all that kind of stuff. It's got nothing to do with that. So please don't think so. All right. So yes, I just wanted to get all that out of the way. I've had somewhat of a fascination with the whole red and blue thing for a very long time, ever since I was a kid. I think the first experience I had with this red and blue stuff was when I studied martial arts. I did a bunch of different martial arts as a young person, and I did two different Korean styles, Tang Sudo and Taekwondo. And for probably like 10 years of my childhood, I was bowing to a Korean flag. Despite the dismay of my grandfather who fought in the Korean War. He really hated the fact that he would see me go into these, it wasn't a dojo because it wasn't Japanese. I forget what the Korean name is for a martial arts studio, but I'd go in there and I'd bow to a Korean flag and my grandfather would have a conniption fit. So that was probably my first interest in red and blue. I just kind of had that sort of embedded in my brain from a young age. And I've always liked the yin and yang symbol. The Korean flag has essentially a yin and a yang, but it's red and blue instead of black and white. The other thing I could think of with red and blue is the old 3D glasses. If you're old enough to remember, you'd get glasses where one lens was blue and one lens was red. As a kid, I used to go see 3D movies, and I think Friday the 13th, what was it? Part 3, I think. I think I saw that. That was the one, right? The Friday the 13th that was in 3D. I'm pretty sure that was 3. That would make sense. Friday the 13th, Part 3, 3D. I saw that in theaters, and that was probably the first time I put those glasses on. And I always thought that was crazy cool. Like, why? What makes it different? I don't know why it's making something look like it's three-dimensional. Later to find out that it does that because the red and the blue lenses are opposites on the color wheel. And that's how it sort of tricks your brain into perceiving depth. That opposite of colors, the opposing forces, if you will, is something that, again, from a young age, I was kind of interested in. And I'm trying to think of another example. A little bit later, when I was in high school, that Guns N' Roses double album, User Illusion 1 and 2, one was a blue cover and one was a red cover. And it seems like every time I mention something, I got to preface it by saying, like, I didn't like that. But I kind of have to. I didn't like those albums. I didn't get them at the time. I've never been much of a fan of Guns N' Roses. But I thought the concept of it was really cool, again, because I had already had some vague understanding of this red and blue being opposing forces. And someone that packaged an album in that way, to me, was really cool. I thought the whole idea behind it was pretty novel. And I like that a lot. Not that they were the first to do that. I don't know who was the first to do that. But for me in high school, that was the first time I'd seen something conceptually packaged in terms of color. So I get older. I grow into a teenager and a young adult, and I start making music myself. That whole concept of opposing forces, sustaining balance in the universe, which is the heart of what the yin and yang symbol means. The yin and yang is black and white, but inside the black there's a little white circle, and inside the white's a little black circle. It's because nothing is purely good or purely bad. There's a little drop of something else opposing in whatever is inherently good or inherently bad. Nothing is perfect, I guess is what that symbol represents. For whatever reason, the Korean flag dropped the little dots in the thing. You know, it's just blue and red. Don't know why, but that's neither here nor there. As I became a musician, I started recording music. I started to incorporate that whole opposing forces, sustaining balance in the universe theme, I guess, in my work. I did an album called Opposites Are One, where each alternating track was the opposite of the previous track. I've done things like I released the Vigilante Romance album that was violent, just like the story Vigilante Romance is violent. And then after that, I came out with Mayberry Romance, which is the opposite. It is a very peaceful album, and the Mayberry Romance story is also very peaceful. Thinking of other examples like Wall Weep versus Roselle, another alternating album of mine. Wall Weep is very dark from a mystic point of view, and Roselle was much more optimistic from like a pioneering perspective, all dealing with the state of Utah. The northern part of Utah is Roselle, and the southern part of Utah is Wall Weep. That was just the theme I was working with at the time. So this whole opposing themes and the things that I create has been a part of what I do. And that's carried on into this time of my life now where I'm apparently writing books. In this second book of mine, the Blue Book, I even brought in some of these opposing forces in the characters as well. So in the story Prohyresis, the protagonist's name is Wojtek, Wojtek. Wojtek is how you say his name. It's a Slavic name. And his polar opposite is Hyman. That's the villain. He's not, you have to read the story. He's not really a villain, but it is his opposite. They have a lot in common, and their interaction between them does something to sustain a certain amount of balance in the community in which they are both part of. Not giving too much away in the story, but when you read it, hopefully you do read it, it'll kind of make sense. You'll be able to see the relationship that these two figures have and how that relationship helps to maintain some sort of balance in this community. Also in Mayberry Romance, the protagonist of Mayberry Romance, his opposite would be Ernest T. Bass. If you're familiar with the Andy Griffith Show, you know what a volatile figure Ernest T. Bass is. So you could imagine how there could be a relationship between that sort of person. They talk to each other as if Ernest T. Bass is the Gemini of the protagonist of that story. That's how deep that opposing relationship is. And again, that relationship fosters a certain amount of balance in the town of Mayberry. I think it does. Hopefully you'll agree when you read the story. But that's not what we're here to talk about. I keep going on tangents in these videos. The first book, the Red Book. So why is that book red? And how do the stories within that book express redness? Let's talk about what red means, at least what it means to me. So most obviously, red is the color of blood. Red is a very carnal color. It's about violence and angst. And red is the color of burning, of fire. Red is blatant authority. So it's authority that is out there, out front saying, this is the law, abide by it. I should state also that I don't see these qualities in any sort of like positive or negative framework at all. Red is not any better or worse than blue, just as hatred itself. Hatred is a very red emotion. Hatred in itself is not a negative feeling to have. It just depends on what you hate and why you hate it. The outcome of that hatred can actually lead to a positive result for yourself. It just depends on the context. All 7 of the stories in book 1 deal with these concepts of redness in a variety of ways. There were 3 Vade stories, which essentially depict the burning anger of a demonic force. Promontory and Einhander celebrate the glory of carnage. And then there's Vigilante Romance, where the protagonist essentially cleanses himself through vengeance and violence. So yes, the stories in book 1 are certainly very red. Let's talk about blue for a moment. So blue is the color of the sky, most obviously. Blue represents the heavens. Blue is a calming color. It is the opposite of fire. It is a cooling color. In terms of how red deals with conflict aggressively and by embracing our corporal forms, Blue deals with conflict by embarking beyond our corporal forms. There's a certain degree of extroversion with blue. Blue is a creative color, and it's a creative color with suppleness and nuance. In terms of authority, if red is blatant authority, blue is a secretive authority. Blue can be just as authoritative as red, but there is a certain degree of reading between the lines to even detect that blue is being authoritative when it is. And yes, all 7 stories in Book 2 express these concepts of blueness in one way or another. In terms of violence, Book 2 is violent. There's certainly some violent elements in Book 2, but the violence here is not vulgar. The violence in Book 1 is deliberately vulgar. The conflict that arises in Book 2 is more often an internal conflict. For example, the protagonists in the stories like Continual Self-Exorcism, Cathicon, Prohyrsis, these protagonists deal with the conflicts of their inner mind. And the battles they fight, although they do fight battles in the real world, those battles are first realized internally through a great deal of introspection. Blue is certainly a more introspective color than red. I've always liked the term suppleness. Like I was saying before, I studied martial arts as a kid, and I did the Korean styles. The Korean styles would be considered hard styles of martial arts, where all of the movements are very punctuated. There's not a lot of transition from one movement to the next. It's a very red style, a very external style of martial arts. After I did those, I studied Shaolin Kung Fu. And Kung Fu is a Chinese martial art which is considered a soft style of martial arts. Now, I mean, being realistic, neither style, no martial art is actually practical. But in terms of practicality, the blue styles of martial arts like Shaolin are even less practical than the red, like Taekwondo or Tang Soo Do. The blue styles, the soft styles, Kung Fu leans much heavier into the art of martial arts, whereas the Korean styles lean heavily into the martial of martial arts, if that makes sense to you. I'm telling you all that to tell you that when I did study Shaolin, one of my favorite forms that I learned, forms are just like a series of movements, it's like an imaginary battle, was called Supple Dragon. And that was the first time when I was a teenager that I heard the word supple. I never quite knew what it meant, and it's always stuck with me. I'd like to define suppleness by telling you what it's not. It's not being malleable. Being malleable means that something else can change your form, change your position, make you do something that you wouldn't normally do. You would bend to the will of some external force. In that relationship, that external force benefits and you lose by being malleable. Being supple means that it's a volitional choice. It's a choice that an individual makes to change their view, to change their position, to act differently given the circumstances because they benefit personally from that decision. Not an external force. They benefit. That's the difference between malleable and suppleness. The story Monogenism from Book 2, I really think that story defines suppleness. The protagonist changes in multiple ways in that story to benefit himself and benefit his relationship with XLZABK002, which ultimately benefits like a whole new generation of humanity. So I guess that's why I just went on this tangent about suppleness, is to tell you that Book 2 expresses suppleness, a very blue characteristic, and I think Monogenism is the best story in that regard. One more example from Book 2, in terms of extroversion. I should qualify this by saying, I think as a person, I'm a very introverted person. I don't like people very much. That's why there's no one around anywhere you're seeing. In these videos you may have watched of mine, there's nobody else around. I really just don't like people. But the protagonist of Mayberry Romance, he learns the benefits of extroversion. He finds peace within himself through extroversion. When I was writing that story, I had to sort of step out of myself and look at the situation that this young man is in the story objectively, what is going to bring him the greatest amount of happiness in the end? And that extroversion, something that he was reluctant to embody, embracing that extroversion and using it for your own benefit, I think is very powerful. And it's a skill. For people like myself, I don't even like doing these videos, to be honest with you. I am reluctant to do this. I would just really want people to read this book. So I am making these series of videos, and this is a long one. And if you've watched this far, thank you, I guess. I don't know. Again, I'm going completely down another path of this conversation. I don't like doing these videos. I don't like speaking to a camera. I don't like talking about, there's so much more to this book that I can't even put into words. Like, it's just like, I don't know how to vocalize a lot of the layers to these stories and a lot of the symbolism that's in these stories. I'm keeping all these conversations I'm having with the camera, and I guess I'm having them with you, whoever you might be. I'm keeping them very surface level, because so it's almost as if I were to go too deep into these stories, it might scare you away or something. I don't know. I don't even know if that's a rational thought. I don't even know what I'm saying. It's a beautiful day out here, and I'm sitting here talking to a camera about Mayberry Romance. The protagonist of Mayberry Romance, I guess what I'm saying is I wrote him to do what I would be reluctant at my own detriment, reluctant to the extent that it would be detrimental to me to do. And that is embrace extroversion, a very blue quality extroversion. I'm not sure how interesting this is at all to you guys, so I'm going to just end this video with a nice, peaceful, tranquil blue shot of my dog Ricky laying on that little corner of carpet on this deck that we're on right now. Most of the work I've done is conceptual. Even the music I made in the past, but this writing stuff especially is very conceptual. And I know that's not everybody's cup of tea, but structuring my stories within these themes, it makes me happy to do them that way, to be honest with you. And I figured I would just make a video to tell you about it. So hopefully you have a little bit better understanding of why this is blue and why the first one is red. And if you read both of them, it should resonate with you pretty clearly that one is a very red book and this is a very blue book. Anyways, I'm rambling now. That's Ricky. I'm John. Book comes out February 11th. Thanks for watching.